The morning Olivia Reeves realized she was pregnant, she also discovered her husband's body hanging from the rafters of their barn. And within the hour, his brother Marcus arrived at her door demanding she sign over the deed to her land or face consequences far worse than widowhood. She stood in the doorway of the small farmhouse outside Centralia, Washington, her hands trembling as she gripped the wooden frame. Marcus Reeves was a large man, thick through the shoulders and mean through the eyes, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and left unfinished. He had always frightened her, even before she married his younger brother Thomas. Now, with Thomas gone and no one to stand between them, that fear crystallized into something cold and sharp in her chest. "You got no business keeping this land," Marcus said, his voice like gravel scraping against stone. "Thomas owed me money, a lot of money. This property settles that debt." Olivia knew it was a lie. Thomas had been many things, weak-willed and prone to drinking among them, but he had never borrowed money from his brother. Marcus had wanted this land for years, the 160 acres that bordered the Chehalis River, perfect for cattle and timber. With Thomas alive, there had been no way to take it. With Thomas dead, there was nothing stopping him except a grieving widow. "The land is mine," Olivia said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Thomas left it to me." Marcus stepped closer, and she could smell whiskey and tobacco on his breath. "You think anyone in this town is going to side with you over me? You think Sheriff Dawson gives a damn about some woman who can't even keep her husband from stringing himself up?" The words cut deep, but Olivia held her ground. "Get off my property." Something dangerous flickered in Marcus's eyes. He reached out and grabbed her wrist, his fingers digging into her flesh hard enough to bruise. "You got 1 week to sign those papers. After that, I'm taking what's mine and you can go wherever women like you end up." He released her with a shove that sent her stumbling backward into the house. By the time she caught her balance, he was already walking back to his horse, his boots leaving deep prints in the mud. Olivia closed the door and leaned against it, her whole body shaking now. She pressed one hand to her stomach, feeling nothing yet, but knowing with absolute certainty what was growing there. She had missed her monthly courses twice now, and there was a tenderness in her breasts, a strange queasiness in the mornings. The baby had been conceived sometime in late April, which meant it was now early June of 1883, and she had perhaps 7 months before the child would arrive. 7 months to figure out how to survive Marcus Reeves. She could not go to the sheriff. Marcus had been right about that. Sheriff Dawson was in Marcus's pocket, had been for years. Half the men in Centralia owed Marcus money or favors or both. He owned the largest ranch in Lewis County, ran cattle and horses, and had his fingers in every business from the sawmill to the saloon. Thomas had been his weak point, the younger brother who had somehow managed to claim a piece of prime land through a government grant before Marcus could stop him. Now Thomas was gone, and Marcus would not rest until he had what he believed was rightfully his. The funeral was 3 days later, attended by fewer people than Olivia had expected. She stood beside the grave in her black dress, the fabric already too tight around her middle though no one could tell yet beneath the layers of petticoats and corset. The Reverend spoke words about mercy and redemption, but Olivia barely heard them. She was thinking about money, about options, about how a woman alone with a child could possibly make her way in a world that seemed designed to crush people like her. After the service, as people were beginning to drift away, a man approached her who she did not recognize. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that brushed his collar and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He wore dusty trail clothes and a gun belt slung low on his hips, and there was something about the way he moved that suggested he knew how to use that gun very well. "Mrs. Reeves," he said, removing his hat. "My name is Garrett Stone. I worked with your husband about 5 years back, up in the timber camps near Olympia. I heard about what happened and wanted to pay my respects." Olivia studied him, trying to place the name, but Thomas had worked so many jobs over the years that it was impossible to remember them all. "That is kind of you, Mr. Stone. I also heard Marcus has been giving you trouble," Garrett said, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. "I wanted you to know that if you need help, I am staying at the boarding house on Main Street. Room 7. Before Olivia could respond, he put his hat back on and walked away, leaving her standing alone beside her husband's grave with more questions than answers. That night, Marcus came back. Olivia heard his horse before she saw him, the heavy hoofbeats on the road turning into her property. She had been sitting at the kitchen table, trying to figure out her finances by lamplight, and the sound sent ice through her veins. She quickly gathered up the papers and shoved them into a drawer, then grabbed the rifle Thomas kept by the door. Marcus did not bother knocking. He kicked the door open with enough force to crack the frame, and suddenly he was inside, filling up the small kitchen with his bulk and his rage. "You've been telling people I threatened you," he said, advancing on her. "You've been running your mouth about things that are none of your business." Olivia raised the rifle, but her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. "Get out!" Marcus laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You even know how to use that thing?" He took another step forward. "Put it down before you hurt yourself." "I mean it," Olivia said, but even she could hear the weakness in her voice. Marcus moved fast for a big man. He grabbed the barrel of the rifle and yanked it from her hands, then backhanded her across the face hard enough to send her crashing into the table. Pain exploded through her cheek and jaw, and she tasted blood. She scrambled backward, trying to get away, but Marcus caught her by the hair and hauled her upright. "You are going to sign those papers," he hissed in her ear. "And then you are going to disappear. You understand me?" Olivia could not breathe, could not think past the pain and the terror. She clawed at his hand, trying to break free, and felt strands of her hair tearing out at the roots. Then suddenly Marcus staggered backward, releasing her, and Olivia heard the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. "Step away from her." Garrett Stone stood in the doorway, his revolver pointed directly at Marcus's chest. In the lamplight, his face was hard as iron, and there was nothing friendly or gentle in his expression now. He looked like exactly what he was, a man who had killed before and would not hesitate to do it again. Marcus raised his hand slowly, but there was no fear in his face, only calculation. "This is not your business, friend." "I am making it my business," Garrett said. "Get out, now." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other, and Olivia held her breath, waiting for the violence that seemed inevitable. Then Marcus smiled, cold and cruel. "You just made a big mistake, Cowboy. Nobody crosses me in this town and lives to regret it." "I have been regretting things my whole life," Garrett said. "One more will not make much difference. Now get on your horse and ride out, or I will put a bullet in you and tell the sheriff you were trespassing." Marcus looked at Olivia, and the promise in his eyes made her blood run cold. Then he turned and walked out, taking the rifle with him. They heard his horse galloping away into the night, and only then did Garrett lower his gun. "Are you hurt?" he asked, stepping closer to examine her face. Olivia touched her cheek and felt it already swelling. "I will be fine." "How did you know to come?" "I have been keeping an eye on the place," Garrett said. "I figured Marcus would not wait long before making his move." He looked around the small kitchen, taking in the broken door frame and the overturned chair. "You cannot stay here. It is not safe." "This is my home," Olivia said, but even as she spoke the words, she knew they were meaningless. Marcus would come back, and next time he might bring men with him. Next time, Garrett might not be there to stop him. You have family you can go to? Garrett asked. Friends? Olivia shook her head. She had come to Washington Territory from Missouri 3 years ago to marry Thomas, leaving behind a mother who had died shortly after and no siblings to speak of. Thomas's family was just Marcus, and she would rather die than ask him for help. Garrett was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he said, I have a friend who runs a ranch about 30 miles north of here up in the foothills. He is always looking for help, and he is a good man. He would give you work and a place to stay, no questions asked. You could go there until things settled down. What things? Olivia asked, a bitter laugh escaping her. Marcus is not going to settle down. He wants this land and he will do whatever it takes to get it. Then sell it, Garrett said. Sell it to someone else, someone Marcus cannot bully. Take the money and start over somewhere new. Olivia wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she could fight Marcus and win, but she knew it was impossible. She was one woman alone against a man with power and money, and no conscience. And now she had a baby to think about, a child who needed her alive and whole. I need time, she said finally. Time to think, to figure out what to do. Garrett nodded. Then come north with me. Stay at the ranch at least until the baby comes. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. How did you know? I grew up on a ranch with 7 sisters, Garrett said, a small smile touching his lips for the first time. I know the signs, and I know that changes things. You need somewhere safe, Mrs. Reeves. Let me help you. Olivia looked at this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere and saved her life, and she made a decision that would change everything. All right, I will go with you. They left before dawn the next morning, riding out on 2 horses with everything Olivia owned packed into saddlebags, and a single trunk strapped to a pack mule. Garrett had spent the night sitting on her porch with his gun across his knees, keeping watch, while Olivia had packed and tried to sleep, and mostly just lay awake thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. The land around Centralia was lush and green in early summer, thick forests of Douglas fir and western red cedar broken up by meadows full of wildflowers. They followed the river north, staying off the main roads, and Garrett kept a constant watch on their back trail. Olivia rode in silence, her body aching from the previous night's violence and her mind churning with fear and uncertainty. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat a cold meal of bread and dried meat. Olivia sat on a fallen log and watched Garrett tend to the animals with practiced efficiency. He moved with a quiet confidence that she found strangely reassuring, as if he were someone who had seen enough of the world to be surprised by very little. Why are you helping me? She asked finally. You said you knew Thomas, but that was years ago. You do not owe me anything. Garrett was quiet for a long moment, his hand still on the horse's bridle. I knew Thomas, he said slowly, but I also knew Marcus. We had a run-in about 6 years back when I was working security for a cattle drive. Marcus tried to rustle some of the herd, and when we caught him at it, he claimed the cattle were his. It turned into a big mess, lawyers and judges, and Marcus won because he had money and connections, and we were just cowboys passing through. The man who owned that herd lost everything. Ended up eating a bullet in a hotel room in Tacoma. Olivia felt her stomach turn. I am sorry. I swore then that if I ever got a chance to put a thorn in Marcus Reeves's side, I would take it, Garrett said, looking at her directly. When I heard Thomas had died and Marcus was moving on the widow, I figured that chance had come. So I am not doing this out of charity, Mrs. Reeves. I am doing this because I hate bullies and Marcus is the worst kind there is. You can call me Olivia, she said, and thank you for being honest. They rode on through the afternoon, climbing gradually into the foothills of the Cascade Mountains. The air grew cooler and the trees grew taller, towering evergreens that blocked out much of the sunlight and made the forest floor a dim cathedral of moss and ferns. Olivia had never been this far north before, and despite everything, she found herself captivated by the wild beauty of it. As evening approached, they reached a cleared valley where a ranch sprawled across several hundred acres. There was a main house built of logs, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals full of horses. Smoke rose from the chimney, and Olivia could see men moving about doing evening chores. "This is the place," Garrett said. "Belongs to a man named Samuel Hart. He is rough around the edges, but his word is good. If he says you are safe here, you are safe." Samuel Hart turned out to be a man in his 50s with a weather-beaten face and shrewd blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He listened to Garrett's explanation without interruption, his gaze occasionally flicking to Olivia and then away, and when Garrett finished, Samuel nodded once. "You can stay as long as you need," he said to Olivia. "I've got a small cabin out back that is not being used. It is not much, but it has got a good stove and a decent bed. In exchange, I would appreciate help with cooking and mending if you are able. My men are useless with both." "I can do that," Olivia said, relief flooding through her. "Thank you, Mr. Hart. Call me Samuel," he said. "And you are welcome. Any enemy of Marcus Reeves is a friend of mine. That man tried to buy me out 3 years running, and when I would not sell, he poisoned my water supply. Lost 30 head of cattle before we figured out what he had done. So Marcus had enemies. That was something, at least." The cabin Samuel provided was small but clean, a single room with a narrow bed, a wood stove, a table and 2 chairs, and little else. To Olivia, who had spent the last 24 hours fearing for her life, it looked like paradise. She unpacked her few belongings while Garrett brought in firewood and got the stove going, and by the time darkness fell, the cabin was warm and filled with the smell of coffee brewing. "I will be staying in the bunkhouse with the other men," Garrett said, standing in the doorway. "But if you need anything, just send word. Samuel runs a tight outfit. Nobody here will bother you." "Will you stay?" Olivia asked, and then felt her face heat with embarrassment. "I mean, will you stay on the ranch for a while, or are you just passing through?" Garrett smiled, and it transformed his whole face, softening the hard edges and making him look younger. "I will stay as long as you need me to," he said. "I've got nowhere else to be." After he left, Olivia sat at the table and allowed herself to cry for the first time since Thomas's death. She cried for her husband, for the life she had thought she would have, for the child growing inside her who would never know their father. She cried from fear and exhaustion and relief, and when she was done, she felt hollowed out but somehow lighter, as if the tears had washed away something toxic that had been building up inside her. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that was almost peaceful. Olivia cooked meals for the ranch hands, mended their clothes, and helped Samuel's housekeeper, a cheerful older woman named Dorothy, with preserving vegetables and making cheese. The work was hard but satisfying, and for the first time in years, Olivia felt useful in a way that had nothing to do with being someone's wife. Her belly began to swell, slowly at first, and then more noticeably. She let out the seams on her dresses and wore loose aprons to disguise the growing curve, but it was impossible to hide completely. The ranch hands were respectful and kept their distance, and if they noticed her condition, they said nothing about it. Garrett was around often, helping with the horses, or riding out to check on the herds in the high meadows. He had a way with animals that bordered on magical, and Olivia would sometimes watch him gentle a wild mustang or doctor a sick cow with patience and skill that spoke of years of experience. He was kind to her in a way that was careful and unassuming, bringing her fresh milk in the mornings or a handful of wildflowers he had found on the trail, never pushing for more than she was willing to give. One evening in late July, Olivia was sitting outside her cabin watching the sunset when Garrett rode up. He dismounted and led his horse to the water trough, then came over and sat down on the steps beside her. "Beautiful night," he said. "It is," Olivia agreed. The sky was streaked with orange and pink, and the air smelled of pine and wood smoke. "I never realized how much I missed this kind of quiet. Centralia always felt so loud, even when it was not." Garrett nodded. "I know what you mean. Sometimes the worst noise is the kind that happens inside your own head." They sat in companionable silence for a while, and then Olivia said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why do you keep helping me? I know what you said about Marcus, but there has to be more to it than that. You could have just run him off that night and left it at that. You did not have to bring me here, did not have to stay." Garrett looked down at his hands, scarred and calloused from years of hard work. "My mother was in a situation like yours once," he said quietly, "before I was born. My father was a mean drunk who liked to use his fists, and when she got pregnant with me, she ran. She ended up working on a ranch in Montana, and the owner and his wife took her in, gave her a place to stay and a way to support herself. If they had not done that, I probably would not be here. So when I see someone who needs help, I think about my mother and what those people did for her, and I try to do the same." Olivia felt her throat tighten. "What happened to your father?" "He died in a bar fight before I was born," Garrett said. "My mother remarried when I was 5, to a good man who treated her right. I grew up on his ranch, and he taught me everything I know about horses and cattle and how to be decent to people. He passed about 10 years ago, and my mother followed him a year later. I have been drifting ever since, working where the work is, never staying anywhere too long." "Do you ever want to settle down?" Olivia asked. "Have a place of your own?" Garrett smiled, but there was sadness in it. "Sure. But it takes money to buy land, and I have never been good at holding on to money. Every time I save up a little, something comes along and I end up spending it. A friend in trouble, a sick horse, a debt that needs paying. I am not complaining. It is just the way things have worked out." "You are a good man, Garrett Stone," Olivia said softly. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something passed between them that made Olivia's breath catch. Then he looked away, breaking the moment. "I should get going. Samuel wants me to ride out early tomorrow to check on the north pasture. You take care, Olivia. You too." As summer turned to autumn, Olivia's pregnancy became impossible to hide. Her belly swelled until it pressed against the fabric of even her loosest dresses, and she felt the baby moving inside her, strange flutters that gradually became stronger kicks and rolls. Dorothy and Samuel treated her condition as if it were the most natural thing in the world, and the ranch hands were unfailingly polite, tipping their hats when she passed and complimenting her cooking with genuine enthusiasm. Garrett, though, became more protective. He made excuses to be near the cabin more often, fixing a loose board on the porch or chopping extra firewood or just stopping by to check if she needed anything. Olivia found herself looking forward to his visits with an intensity that surprised her. She had been married for 3 years, but what she felt for Garrett was nothing like what she had felt for Thomas. This was deeper, more complicated, a mix of gratitude and attraction, and something else she was afraid to name. One afternoon in early September, Samuel called her into the main house. Garrett was there too, his face serious, and Olivia felt her stomach drop. "What is wrong?" she asked. "I got word from Centralia," Samuel said. "Marcus has been asking around about you. He knows you left with Garrett, and he has been trying to figure out where you went." So far, nobody has told him anything, but it is only a matter of time before he finds out. Olivia sank into a chair, her hands instinctively going to her belly. "What do I do?" "You stay here," Samuel said firmly. "Let him come. He will not get past my property line without getting a bullet for his trouble." "I cannot let you put yourself at risk for me," Olivia said, even though the thought of leaving made her want to cry. This place had become a sanctuary, the first real home she had felt since coming to Washington Territory. "You are not letting me do anything," Samuel said. "I am offering because I want to. Besides, I have been itching for an excuse to put Marcus Reeves in his place for years." Garrett leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "There might be another way. If you sold the land in Centralia, got it out of your name legally, Marcus would have no reason to come after you. The deed is what he wants. Without that, you are just another widow with no property and he has got no claim on you." "But who would buy it?" Olivia asked. "Anyone in Centralia would be too afraid of Marcus to make an offer." "What about someone outside Centralia?" Garrett said. "Someone who does not care what Marcus thinks." Samuel stroked his beard, thinking. "I might know someone. Got a cousin down in Portland who has been looking to expand into timber land. He has got money and lawyers, and he is not the kind of man who scares easy. If I wrote to him, explained the situation, he might be willing to make you an offer." Hope flickered in Olivia's chest. "You would do that for me?" "I would," Samuel said, "but it will take time. A few weeks, maybe more, to get the paperwork sorted and the money transferred. You will need to lie low until then." "I can do that," Olivia said. Over the next few weeks, Olivia threw herself into preparing for the baby's arrival. Dorothy helped her sew tiny gowns and blankets, and Samuel's carpenter built a simple cradle that Garrett sanded smooth and painted. Olivia found herself daydreaming about what the child would look like, whether it would be a boy or a girl, what kind of person they would grow up to be. She tried not to think about Thomas, about the fact that this baby would never know their father, but sometimes late at night, the grief would hit her hard and unexpected, and she would lie in bed crying as quietly as she could. One evening in mid-September, Garrett knocked on her cabin door carrying a parcel wrapped in brown paper. "I got you something," he said, looking almost shy. Olivia unwrapped the parcel and found a beautifully knitted baby blanket, soft wool in shades of cream and pale blue. "Garrett, this is lovely. Where did you get it?" "I rode into town last week and saw it in a shop," he said. "I thought you might like it." Olivia held the blanket to her chest, overwhelmed. "Thank you. You did not have to do this." "I wanted to," Garrett said. He hesitated, then added, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you scared?" "About the baby, I mean." Olivia thought about lying, about saying she was fine, but something in Garrett's expression made her want to be honest. "Terrified," she admitted. "I have never done this before, and I will be doing it alone. What if I am not a good mother? What if something goes wrong?" Garrett stepped closer and took her hand, his grip warm and solid. "You are going to be a wonderful mother. Anyone can see that. And you are not alone, Olivia. You have got Samuel and Dorothy and me. We will help you through this." Olivia looked up at him, at the earnestness in his face, and felt something shift inside her. This man, who owed her nothing, who had walked into her life at its darkest moment and refused to leave, had somehow become the person she trusted most in the world. "I do not know what I would have done without you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Garrett lifted his free hand and gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face. "You would have found a way. You are stronger than you think." For a moment, they stood there in the doorway of the cabin, hands clasped, the autumn evening settling around them. Then Garrett stepped back, breaking the contact. "I should go. You need your rest." After he left, Olivia sat on her bed and held the baby blanket, thinking about the cowboy who had ridden into her life like something out of a story. She had been married, had loved her husband in her own way, but what she felt for Garrett was different. It was the feeling of being truly seen, truly valued, not as a wife or a possession, but as a person in her own right. And that, she realized, was something worth fighting for. The letter from Samuel's cousin arrived in early October, just as the leaves were beginning to turn, and the air carried the first real chill of autumn. The offer was more than fair, enough money to give Olivia a fresh start and then some. Samuel arranged for a lawyer in Olympia to handle the sale, keeping everything as far from Centralia and Marcus as possible. The paperwork took another 2 weeks to finalize, and every day Olivia woke up expecting to see Marcus riding up the valley with men behind him. But he never came. Finally, in late October, the sale was complete. The land that had caused so much pain and fear was no longer hers, and with it went the last tie binding her to Thomas and his brother. Samuel deposited the money in an account in Olympia under Olivia's name, and just like that, she was free. "What will you do now?" Dorothy asked her one morning as they worked together in the kitchen, rolling out pie dough. Olivia looked down at her swollen belly. The baby was due in about 2 months, and she felt huge and ungainly, her back aching and her ankles swelling. "I do not know," she said honestly. "I cannot stay here forever taking advantage of Samuel's kindness." "You are not taking advantage," Dorothy said firmly. "You work hard and Samuel appreciates it. Besides, I think someone else would be mighty disappointed if you left." Olivia felt her face heat. "I do not know what you mean." Dorothy gave her a knowing look. "That cowboy has been mooning over you since the day you arrived, and do not tell me you have not noticed because I have got eyes in my head." "He has been kind to me," Olivia said carefully. "But I am pregnant with another man's child. I cannot ask him to take that on." "Did he seem like he was asking your permission?" Dorothy said, laughing. "That man would walk through fire for you, honey. The question is not whether he wants you. The question is whether you want him." Olivia did not answer, but Dorothy's words stayed with her for the rest of the day. Did she want Garrett? The answer was yes, but it was complicated. She was still grieving Thomas, still adjusting to the idea of being a mother, still trying to figure out who she was outside of being someone's wife. Adding a romance on top of all that felt overwhelming. But then she thought about the way Garrett looked at her, the way his face lit up when she smiled, the way he was always there when she needed him. She thought about the baby blanket and the firewood and the wildflowers, all the small kindnesses that added up to something much larger. And she realized that maybe love did not have to be complicated. Maybe it could be as simple as finding someone who saw you at your worst and chose to stay anyway. That evening, Olivia walked out to the barn where Garrett was tending to a mare who had thrown a shoe. He looked up when she entered, surprise crossing his face. "Everything all right?" he asked, setting down the horse's hoof. "I wanted to talk to you," Olivia said. "If you have time." "Always got time for you," Garrett said, wiping his hands on his trousers. "What is on your mind?" Olivia took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. "I have been thinking about what happens after the baby comes, where I will go, what I will do. And I realize that I do not want to leave this place. I do not want to leave you." Garrett went very still. "Olivia." "I know it is complicated," she said quickly, before she lost her nerve. "I know I am pregnant, and that I have only been a widow for a few months, and that I probably should not be saying any of this. But you have been so good to me, Garrett. You have been kind and patient, and you have never asked for anything in return, and I just need you to know that I see that. I see you, and I care about you. A lot." Garrett crossed the space between them in 3 long strides and took her hands in his. "I have been in love with you since the day I met you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know the timing is terrible, and I know you have got a lot on your plate, but I do not care. I love you, Olivia. I love your strength and your courage and the way you keep fighting even when everything seems impossible. And I already love that baby you are carrying because that baby is part of you." Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. "You cannot mean that." "I do mean it," Garrett said fiercely. "I know I am just a cowboy with no land and no prospects. I know I cannot give you the kind of life you deserve. But if you will have me, I will spend every day trying to make you happy. I will raise that baby as my own, and I will never give you cause to regret choosing me." Olivia laughed through her tears. "You are not just a cowboy. You are the best man I have ever known." Garrett pulled her into his arms, careful of her belly, and held her like she was something precious. "Does that mean you will give me a chance?" "Yes," Olivia whispered against his chest. "Yes, Garrett, I will give you a chance." They stood there in the barn, holding each other while the mare watched with patient eyes, and Olivia felt something inside her that had been broken for so long finally begin to heal. The next 2 months passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Garrett moved his few belongings from the bunkhouse into Olivia's cabin, and though they kept separate sleeping areas out of respect for propriety, everyone on the ranch knew they were courting. Samuel gave them his blessing with a gruff nod and a warning to Garrett that he had better treat her right, and Dorothy cried happy tears and immediately started planning a wedding after the baby was born. Garrett was attentive in ways that made Olivia's heart ache. He rubbed her swollen feet in the evenings, brought her breakfast in bed when she was too tired to get up, and talked to her belly when he thought she was not paying attention, telling the baby stories about horses and mountains and all the things they would see together. Olivia fell more in love with him every day, marveling at the fact that this good, kind man wanted to build a life with her. In mid-December, when the first snow was dusting the peaks of the Cascades, Olivia went into labor. It started as a dull ache in her lower back that gradually intensified into waves of pain that left her gasping. Dorothy took charge immediately, sending one of the ranch hands to fetch the midwife from the nearest settlement and turning the cabin into a birthing room. Garrett wanted to stay, but Dorothy shooed him out, telling him this was women's work and he would only be in the way. The labor lasted 14 hours, the longest and most painful night of Olivia's life. She screamed and cried and cursed Thomas for dying and leaving her to do this alone, and then she felt guilty for cursing him and cried some more. Dorothy held her hand and wiped her forehead with cool cloths and told her she was doing wonderfully, and the midwife, a calm older woman named Mrs. Peterson, coached her through each contraction with steady patience. Finally, as dawn was breaking over the mountains, Olivia gave one last push and felt the baby slip free. The pain stopped abruptly, replaced by overwhelming relief, and then she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby crying. "It is a boy," Mrs. Peterson announced, holding up the squirming, red-faced infant. "A healthy boy with a good set of lungs." Olivia held out her arms and Mrs. Peterson placed the baby on her chest. He was tiny and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to look right through her. Olivia touched his cheek, his tiny fingers, his impossibly small toes, and felt love crash over her like a wave. "Hello, sweet boy," she whispered. "I am your mama. I have been waiting to meet you." Dorothy was crying openly now, dabbing at her eyes with her apron. "He is beautiful, honey, just beautiful." After Mrs. Peterson had cleaned them both up and made sure everything was as it should be, Dorothy finally allowed Garrett into the cabin. He came in hesitantly, his hat in his hands, his face pale with worry. "Is she all right?" he asked Dorothy. "Is the baby?" "They are both fine," Dorothy said, beaming. Come see." Garrett approached the bed slowly, and when he saw Olivia holding the baby, his whole face transformed. He knelt beside the bed and looked down at the tiny infant with an expression of such wonder that it made Olivia's throat tight. "He is perfect," Garrett said softly. "Absolutely perfect." "Do you want to hold him?" Olivia asked. Garrett looked uncertain. "I do not want to hurt him." "You will not," Olivia said. She carefully transferred the baby into Garrett's arms, showing him how to support the head, and watched as this rough cowboy who broke horses and faced down dangerous men held her son with infinite gentleness. "Hey there, little man," Garrett murmured. "I am Garrett. I am going to help your mama take care of you, make sure you grow up strong and happy. You are going to have a good life, I promise." The baby made a small sound, almost like he was agreeing, and Garrett laughed. Olivia watched them together and felt her heart overflow. "What are you going to name him?" Dorothy asked. Olivia had thought about this for weeks, going through names in her head and discarding each one. But now, looking at her son in Garrett's arms, the answer came easily. "Oliver," she said. "Oliver Thomas Reeves." After his father, but also as his own person. "Oliver," Garrett repeated, smiling. "I like that. It suits him." Over the following weeks, Olivia adjusted to life as a mother. It was exhausting and overwhelming and wonderful all at once. Oliver was a good baby, sleeping for a few hours at a stretch and only crying when he was hungry or needed changing. But even so, Olivia felt like she was constantly running on no sleep. Garrett helped whenever he could, walking Oliver around the cabin when he was fussy or changing his diapers with a matter-of-fact efficiency that surprised them both. Dorothy brought food and advice, and Samuel carved little wooden toys that Oliver would not be able to use for months, but that Olivia treasured anyway. One night in late January of 1884, when Oliver was about 6 weeks old, Olivia and Garrett were sitting by the fire after putting the baby to bed. Snow was falling outside, covering the ranch in a thick white blanket, and the cabin was warm and cozy. "I have been thinking," Garrett said, staring into the flames. "Samuel offered me a partnership in the ranch. Said he is getting older and could use someone to help manage things, and if I put in some money and sweat equity, he would give me a stake in the place." Olivia felt her heart beat faster. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I would think about it," Garrett said. "It is a good opportunity, the kind I never thought I would get, but it would mean staying here permanently, putting down roots, and I wanted to make sure that is what you want too." "This place feels like home," Olivia said honestly. "More than anywhere I have ever lived. And the idea of staying here with you, raising Oliver where it is safe and beautiful, sounds perfect." Garrett reached over and took her hand. "Then I will tell Samuel yes. We will build a life here, you and me and Oliver, and maybe," he hesitated, "maybe eventually we will add to the family. If that is something you want." Olivia squeezed his hand. "I want that. I want all of it. But first I want to marry you. I want everyone to know that you are mine and I am yours." Garrett's smile was bright enough to light up the whole cabin. "I was hoping you would say that. How about we get married in the spring? Give the weather a chance to clear, have a proper celebration." "Spring sounds perfect," Olivia said. They were married in April, on a day when the meadows were full of wildflowers and the sky was a brilliant blue. The ceremony was simple, held outside with Samuel and Dorothy and the ranch hands as witnesses, and the reverend from the nearest town officiating. Olivia wore a new dress that Dorothy had helped her sew, pale green with delicate embroidery, and Garrett wore his best suit with his hair neatly combed. Oliver, now 4 months old and chubby-cheeked, slept through the entire ceremony in Dorothy's arms. When the reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Garrett kissed Olivia with a tenderness that made her knees weak. The ranch hands cheered and Dorothy cried again, and Samuel opened several bottles of whiskey for a toast. They celebrated late into the evening, with music and dancing and more food than they could possibly eat, and Olivia felt happier than she had ever imagined possible. That night, alone in their cabin with Oliver asleep in his cradle, Garrett and Olivia finally consummated their marriage. It was different from anything Olivia had experienced with Thomas, full of patience and care and a deep emotional connection that made her feel cherished. Afterward, they lay in each other's arms and talked about their dreams for the future, about the children they hoped to have and the life they would build together. "I love you," Olivia whispered in the darkness. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Garrett said, kissing her forehead. "And I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this." "I could never regret you," Olivia said. The years that followed were not without challenges. Running a ranch was hard work, especially as Samuel gradually handed over more responsibility to Garrett. There were harsh winters when feed ran low and they lost cattle to cold or predators. There were dry summers when the creek ran low and they had to ration water. There were injuries and illnesses and all the normal difficulties of life on the frontier. But there was also joy, so much joy. Oliver grew into a bright, curious little boy who loved horses and followed Garrett around like a shadow. When he was 2, Olivia got pregnant again, and this time the pregnancy felt different because she was not scared or alone. Garrett was with her every step of the way, and when she went into labor on a cold February night in 1886, he stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and whispering encouragement. Their daughter was born just before dawn, tiny and perfect with Garrett's gray eyes and Olivia's dark hair. They named her Grace, and Garrett cried when he held her for the first time, overwhelmed by the reality that this was his child, truly his in every way that mattered. 2 years later, Olivia gave birth to another boy, whom they named James. And 3 years after that, twin girls arrived, Elizabeth and Rose, completing their family. The cabin became too small, and Garrett and Samuel built a larger house with enough bedrooms for everyone and a big kitchen where Olivia could cook for her growing family. Oliver never forgot that Garrett was not his biological father, but it never seemed to matter. From the time he could talk, he called Garrett Papa and never questioned it. The other children grew up thinking of Garrett as their father in every sense of the word, and Olivia marveled at how seamlessly he had stepped into that role. Marcus Reeves never came after them. According to reports that occasionally filtered north from Centralia, he had eventually given up on reclaiming the land and focused his attention on other schemes. He died in 1891 from a heart attack, and though Olivia did not celebrate his death, she did feel a sense of closure. The man who had terrorized her was gone, and she was free in a way she had never been before. Samuel passed away in 1895, leaving his share of the ranch to Garrett as promised. By then, Garrett had more than earned it, having turned the operation into one of the most successful in Lewis County. They ran cattle and horses, sold timber from the forested portions of the property, and eventually even started a small sawmill. The children all helped as they grew older, learning the value of hard work and the satisfaction of building something lasting. On a warm summer evening in 1900, Olivia and Garrett sat on the porch of their house, watching their children play in the yard. Oliver, now 16 and tall as his father, was teaching his younger siblings how to rope a fence post. Grace, at 14, was trying to keep her twin sisters from getting into mischief, and James, now 10, was hanging upside down from a tree branch. "Can you believe this is our life?" Olivia said, leaning against Garrett's shoulder. She was 40 now, with threads of silver in her dark hair and laugh lines around her eyes, and she had never felt more beautiful or more content. "Sometimes I have to pinch myself to make sure it is real," Garrett admitted. He was 42, his own hair graying at the temples, his face weathered by years of working outdoors. "I keep thinking about that night I walked into your kitchen and found Marcus threatening you. If I had gotten there 5 minutes later, or if you had turned me away when I offered to help, none of this would have happened." "But you did get there," Olivia said, "and I did not turn you away. We found each other exactly when we were supposed to." Garrett kissed the top of her head. "I told you once that you were stronger than you thought. You proved me right. Look at everything you have built, everything you have survived." "We built it together," Olivia corrected. "I could not have done any of this without you." "We make a good team," Garrett agreed. Oliver came running up to the porch, breathless and grinning. "Papa, can we take the horses out tomorrow? I want to show Grace and James that waterfall you told us about." "If your mother says it is all right," Garrett said, glancing at Olivia. "Just be back before dark," Olivia said. "And take food with you. I will pack something in the morning." Oliver whooped and ran back to tell his siblings, and Olivia smiled. Her oldest son had so much of Thomas in him, the dark hair and quick smile, but he had Garrett's steadiness and kindness. He was going to be a good man, she could already tell. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Olivia thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had lost so much: her first husband, her sense of safety, the naive belief that the world was fair. But she had also gained more than she had ever dreamed possible. A man who loved her completely, children who filled her life with laughter and purpose, a home that was truly hers. She had hidden her growing belly from cruel hands all those years ago, terrified and alone. But a cowboy had found her in her darkest hour and said, "Bring that baby here safe." And he had kept that promise, not just for Oliver but for all of them. He had built a safe harbor where they could all grow and thrive. "What are you thinking about?" Garrett asked, noticing the faraway look in her eyes. "How lucky I am," Olivia said simply. "How incredibly, impossibly lucky." "I am the lucky one," Garrett said. "You and these children, this life we have built, it is more than I ever thought I deserved." "You deserve everything good in this world," Olivia told him fiercely. "And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know it." They sat together as darkness fell, and the children eventually came inside, trailing dirt and laughter. Dorothy, now in her 70s but still spry, had stayed for dinner and was setting the table with help from Grace. The house smelled of fresh bread and roasting chicken, and through the windows, Olivia could see the lights of the bunkhouse where their ranch hands were settling in for the evening. After dinner, after the children had been bathed and put to bed with stories and kisses, after Dorothy had gone home and the house was quiet, Olivia and Garrett climbed into their own bed. Garrett pulled her close, and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," she said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she spoke them. "I love you too," Garrett said. "Today, tomorrow, and forever." Olivia closed her eyes and let herself drift toward sleep, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The cruel hands that had once threatened to destroy her were long gone, replaced by these gentle, strong hands that held her like she was precious. The fear that had once consumed her had been transformed into hope, and the loneliness had become a life overflowing with love. She had survived. She had healed. And she had found, in the most unexpected place and with the most unexpected person, a happiness that would last the rest of her days. The cowboy who had promised to bring her baby to safety had given her so much more than that. He had given her a future worth living, a family worth cherishing, and a love that would endure through all the seasons of their lives. In the morning, she would wake up and start another day. She would cook breakfast for her family, help Garrett with the ranch work, tend to her children's needs and dreams. It would be ordinary and familiar and exactly what she wanted. But tonight, in this quiet moment, she simply held onto the man she loved and felt grateful for every twist of fate that had brought them together. Outside, the stars wheeled across the sky above the Washington mountains. Inside, in the house they had built with their own hands and their own determination, a family slept peacefully. And in the master bedroom, a woman who had once been hunted and afraid lay safe in her husband's arms, knowing that she was finally, truly home. The years continued to unfold with a gentle rhythm. Oliver grew into a fine young man and eventually married a schoolteacher from Olympia, bringing her back to the ranch and building a house on the eastern section of the property. Grace followed her heart to nursing school in Seattle and returned with skills that made her invaluable to the community. James developed a talent for breeding horses that rivaled Garrett's own, and the twins, Elizabeth and Rose, though different as night and day, both stayed close to home and helped expand the ranch's operations into new ventures. Garrett and Olivia grew old together, their hair turning white, their hands becoming gnarled with age, but their love never diminishing. They celebrated anniversaries and grandchildren, mourned losses and celebrated triumphs, and through it all remained each other's closest companion and greatest support. On a spring morning in 1920, when Olivia was 60 and Garrett was 62, they rode out together to the meadow where they had been married 36 years earlier. The wildflowers were blooming just as they had on that long-ago April day, and the mountains rose in the distance, unchanged and unchanging. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Olivia asked, dismounting and walking through the flowers. "All the time," Garrett said, joining her. "But then I remember that everything happened exactly as it was supposed to. All the pain and fear and struggle led us here to this life, and I would not change a single moment of it." Olivia took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture that had become second nature over the decades. "Neither would I. You saved me, Garrett Stone. You saved me and my baby, and then you gave us the world." "You saved me right back," Garrett said softly. "I was just drifting before I met you, no purpose, no direction. You gave me a reason to stay in one place, to build something lasting. You gave me a family. You gave me everything." They stood there in the meadow, surrounded by the beauty of the land they had spent their lives tending, and Olivia thought about the frightened young widow she had been, hiding her pregnancy and running from a man who wanted to destroy her. That woman seemed like someone from another lifetime, someone she barely recognized. The woman she had become was stronger, wiser, tempered by hardship but not broken by it. "I want you to know something," Olivia said, looking up at Garrett. "If I had to do it all again, every difficult moment, every terrifying decision, I would do it exactly the same way, because it brought me to you. And you, Garrett Stone, are the best thing that ever happened to me." Garrett's eyes were bright with emotion. He cupped her face in his hands, those weathered hands that had held her through so many years, and kissed her with the same tenderness he had shown on their wedding day. "And you," he said, "are my heart, my home, my everything." They rode back to the ranch together as the sun climbed higher in the sky, ready to face whatever the day would bring, secure in the knowledge that they would face it side by side. The cruel hands that had once threatened to destroy Olivia's life were nothing but a distant memory now, replaced by the strong, gentle hands that had kept her safe and helped her thrive. The story that had begun in fear and desperation had become one of hope and triumph. A cowboy had indeed brought that baby to safety, and in doing so, he had found his own salvation. Together, they had built a legacy that would endure for generations, a testament to the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds and transform even the darkest moments into something beautiful. And as the years continued to pass, as their children grew and their grandchildren arrived and the world changed around them in ways both wonderful and challenging, Garrett and Olivia remained constant. Their love story became the stuff of family legend, told and retold around dinner tables and campfires, a reminder that even in the harshest circumstances, kindness and courage could create miracles. They lived long, full lives, surrounded by the people they loved in the place they had made their own. And when their time finally came to say goodbye to the world they had known, they did so knowing that they had lived well, loved deeply, and left behind something precious that would outlast them both. The ranch continued to thrive under Oliver's stewardship, and then under his children's, each generation adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the foundation that Garrett and Olivia had laid. The house they had built stood strong, filled with new families and new memories, but never forgetting the two people who had started it all. And sometimes, on quiet spring evenings when the wildflowers bloomed in the meadow, those who knew the story would stand outside and look toward the mountains, remembering the frightened young woman and the cowboy who had saved her, and the extraordinary love that had blossomed between them against all odds. It was a story worth remembering, a story worth telling, a story that proved that even in the wildest, most unforgiving places, love could take root and flourish and create something magnificent that would endure forever.